She arrived on the station the same way she always did, quietly, without announcement, without spectacle. The docking bay lights reflected off the smooth metal of her mask as she stepped from the shuttle, her long coat moving softly in the artificial gravity. No one spoke. No one ever did when she was near. Across the station, aliens of dozens of species paused in their work. Some lowered their heads, others turned their bodies away in respect or fear. A few simply froze, unsure what the correct response was supposed to be. Even after years of seeing her, no one truly knew how to act around her. She was known as Envoy Saris, though that was not her real name. It was the name the Coalition gave her because her true name could not be translated into any known language. She had served longer than most governments lasted. She had ended wars without firing a single shot. She had convinced species who hated each other for centuries to sit in the same room, and she had never shown her face. The mask was always there, smooth, pale, and without expression. No eyes, no mouth, just a perfect surface shaped roughly like a humanoid face but slightly wrong, as if it was only an idea of one. Some species believed looking beneath it would cause madness. Others believed it would inspire uncontrollable loyalty. A few claimed it would kill them outright. No one had ever tested those rumors. On the far side of the station, in a quiet operations room filled with soft lights and floating data panels, a human sat alone at a desk. His name was Evan Cole, and at that moment he was focused entirely on a broken sensor report. Evan was not important. He was not a diplomat, not a soldier, not a hero. He was a systems analyst, assigned to monitor translation drift and communication delays between species. It was dull work, necessary but dull. Most days, no one even noticed he was there. That suited him just fine. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, and sighed softly. The station's artificial day cycle had just shifted, and he had been awake longer than he should have been. His console chimed, a soft alert, nothing urgent. "Great," he muttered to himself. "Another misaligned language packet." He reached forward and began correcting the data, fingers moving with quiet familiarity. He did not hear the door open. He only noticed someone was there when the room felt different. Not colder, not darker, just heavier, like the air itself had become more aware. He looked up. Envoy Saris stood a few steps inside the room. Evan blinked once. "Oh," he said. "Hi." The word echoed slightly in the quiet room. Behind the mask, Saris paused. That alone was unusual. Most beings reacted to her presence with visible stress. Raised heart rates, defensive posture, involuntary pheromone release, psychic shielding. Humans usually stiffened too, though they tried to hide it. Evan did none of those things. He simply turned his chair slightly to face her, as if she were any other coworker who had walked in. "I didn't hear you come in," he added. "Do you need something?" The station logs later recorded that Sarah stood there for a full 3 seconds without responding. For her species, that was a very long time. "Yes," she said finally. Her voice passed through a translator field, emerging calm and neutral. "You are Evan Cole." "That's me," he said, offering a small, polite smile. "Let me guess, something's broken." Her head tilted just a fraction. "No," she said. "I require clarification on a linguistic anomaly from the Keth Collective." "Oh," Evan said. "Yeah, I was just looking at that. Their emotional tense markers shifted again. Happens when they're stressed." He gestured at the empty chair across from him without thinking. You can sit, if you want." Several station cameras recorded the moment the envoy of the Coalition was casually invited to sit like a normal person. She did. Her movements were controlled, precise, but there was something almost hesitant about them. She folded herself into the chair, hands resting on her knees, mask angled toward him. Evan returned to his screen, pulling up the relevant data. "They don't mean threat when they say inevitable correction," he explained. "It's more like social pressure. They're worried, not angry." "I see," Sarah said. She watched him as he spoke, not just the words, but the way his face moved. Humans were famously expressive, their emotions leaking through micro-movements they barely noticed. Most species found it distracting. Some found it disturbing. Saris found it grounding. "You did not ask about my mask," she said. Evan shrugged slightly, still typing. "Didn't seem relevant," he replied. "You're here about language stuff, not fashion." Another pause. Across the station, a senior diplomatic aide checked the live feed and frowned. "Is the human malfunctioning?" the aide asked. "No," another replied slowly. "I think he's just human." Saris felt something unfamiliar press against her awareness. Not threat, not fear, curiosity. "You have worked here for 3 standard cycles," she said. "You have seen me many times." "Yeah," Evan said. "Hard to miss." "And yet," she continued, "you have never altered your behavior in my presence." He glanced up at her again, confused. "Should I have?" The question was honest. No challenge, no hidden meaning. Saris studied him more closely now. Humans were considered emotionally volatile by most species. Too fast to bond, too fast to anger, too fast to forgive. They laughed easily and grieved deeply. They loved with intensity and hated with equal strength. They survived emotional extremes that would break others. That was why the coalition kept them at arm's length. "Most beings experience distress when near me," she said. Evan considered that. "Huh," he said. "Sorry about that." That was not the response she expected. "You are not distressed," she said. "Well," he said, leaning back, "I'm tired, underpaid, and my coffee's cold, but that's not really your fault." Silence filled the room again. Saris felt something shift within herself, an internal structure adjusting, like a long unused muscle being stretched. "You treat me as an equal," she said quietly. Evan shrugged. "You're a person, right?" "Yes," she said. "Then yeah, that tracks." He turned back to his screen. The conversation should have ended there, but it didn't. "Evan Cole," she said. He looked up again. "Yes." "May I request your assistance more frequently?" He raised an eyebrow. "Sure," he said, "as long as it doesn't come with extra meetings." She did not understand the joke, but she understood the acceptance. As she left the room moments later, the station felt different to her. Lighter, less constrained by rules written by fear. Behind her mask, something ancient and careful began to wonder. Not what humans were hiding, but how they lived so openly and survived. And for the first time in many years, Envoy Saris looked forward to returning without the mask being the most important thing about her presence. Envoy Saris returned to the operations wing 3 days later. For most beings on the station, her arrival was always announced in advance. Schedules were cleared. Security protocols adjusted. Diplomatic staff prepared themselves mentally. But this time, there was no official notice, no escort of aides, no observers waiting nearby. She walked alone through the long corridor, her steps quiet against the polished floor. The lights reflected softly on her mask, just as they always had, but something inside her felt different. Not weaker, not stronger, less distant. She stopped outside the familiar door and waited a moment before opening it. That pause was deliberate. Her species rarely hesitated, but she was learning that humans often did, and that the pause itself carried meaning. When she entered, Evan was already there. He sat at his desk with a mug in one hand and a data pad in the other, brow slightly furrowed. The mug clearly read "World's Okayest Analyst," though the letters were faded from age. He did not look up right away. "Morning," he said absently. "If this is about the Loran syntax loop, I'm still fixing it." Sarah stopped just inside the room. "You recognized my presence," she said. "Yeah," Evan replied. "The room gets quieter when you show up, hard to explain." He finally looked up, then nodded in greeting like before. "Oh, hi." The word was still simple, still unguarded. She felt that strange internal shift again. "I did not schedule this visit," she said. "That's fine," Evan said. "I didn't schedule this coffee either, it just kind of happened." He gestured at the chair again, and again she sat. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Evan returned to his work, scrolling through lines of translated dialogue and correcting minor emotional mismatches. Saris watched him, her attention focused in a way that would have alarmed most observers. Humans multitasked emotionally without realizing it. Even while concentrating, Evan's face showed faint traces of thought, mild frustration, quiet humor. His emotions did not leak uncontrollably, as many believed. They flowed, adjusted, settled. "You are repairing emotional alignment," she observed. "Yeah," he said. "If we don't, people start thinking others are insulting them when they're not. That's usually how fights start." "You have a great deal of experience with conflict," she said. Evan shrugged. "Everyone does, I think. Humans just talk about it more." Saris processed that. Her species did not talk about conflict. They hid it, buried it behind rules and silence. Their faces were the ultimate barrier, a shield meant to protect both themselves and others, and yet sitting here she felt no need for shields. "There is a summit tomorrow," she said. Evan winced. "Please don't tell me I have to attend," he said. "Last time I was there, someone accused me of emotionally contaminating the room." "That accusation was dismissed," Sarah said. "Still hurt," he replied lightly. She studied him. You are unaffected by social rejection, she said. Evan paused his work and looked at her. No, he said honestly. I just learned not to let it decide who I am. That answer stayed with her longer than she expected. The summit involves the Threxian Compact, she continued. They believe humans are dangerously unstable. Yeah, Evan said. We get that a lot. They will attempt to restrict human participation in emotional mediation roles. Evan frowned. That's not great. No, she agreed. Your species excels in those roles, he smiled faintly. Thanks. Silence returned, but this time it was comfortable. Saris realized something then. This was the first time in decades she had been in a room where her presence was not the most important thing in it. Evan did not orbit her authority. He did not measure his words. He simply existed. Why do you not ask? She said suddenly. Ask what? Evan replied. About my face. He thought for a moment. I guess, he said slowly, if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. The simplicity of it struck her harder than any threat ever had. Her people believed truth was dangerous. Humans treated it as a choice. Across the station, the summit hall filled with delegates the next day. The air buzzed with layered translations, subtle tension, and carefully controlled expressions. Evan stood near the back, exactly where he wanted to be, hands folded behind him. Sarah stood at the center. The Threxian representatives spoke at length, their voice sharp and precise. Their argument was clear. Humans were too emotionally exposed, too unpredictable, too easily influenced. Allowing them deeper integration was a risk. Evan watched the reactions around the room. He saw fear disguised as logic, control disguised as concern. Saris listened without interruption. When the Threxian finished, silence followed. Then Saris spoke. Humans do not lack control, she said calmly. They practice a different form of it. The room stirred. They experience emotion openly, not because they are weak, but because they are resilient. They adapt instead of suppress. The Threxian recoiled slightly. That openness is dangerous, they insisted. Dangerous to whom? Saris asked. The question landed heavily. Evan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He did not know why exactly. He only knew that for the first time someone was speaking for humanity without trying to reshape it. Saris continued. My species hid our faces to protect the galaxy from us, she said. And in doing so, we isolated ourselves. Humans do not hide, and yet they endure. She turned slightly, her mask facing Evan for just a moment. That endurance is not chaos, she said. It is strength. The vote that followed was close, but humanity's role remained unchanged. After the summit, Evan escaped back to the operations wing as fast as he could. He hated crowds, especially political ones. He had just reached his desk when he sensed her again. You defended us, he said before she could speak. It was accurate, Saris replied. Still, he said, thank you, she nodded. There is something I wish to understand, she said. Humans experience emotion intensely, fear, grief, affection. Why does it not overwhelm you? Evan considered. Oh, it does, he said. All the time. She tilted her head. But you continue. Yeah, he said, because feeling something is better than feeling nothing. That answer stayed with her long after she left. That night, alone in her private chamber, Sarah stood before the mirror she rarely used. She looked at the mask reflected back at her, perfect, empty, safe. Her hand rose slowly, stopping just short of touching it. For the first time in centuries, the question was no longer what would happen if I removed it. The question was who would still see me if she did. And somewhere in the station, unaware of the weight of that thought, Evan sipped his reheated coffee and wondered why. For the first time since joining the coalition, he felt like humanity truly belonged. The station was quieter than usual that morning. Corridors echoed with the soft hum of life support systems, and the distant chatter of aliens seemed muffled, almost reluctant. Envoy Saris moved through the hallways with her usual precision, but her thoughts were restless. The summit had ended in her favor, yet something inside her refused to settle. She knew the Threxians would not forget. Their suspicion of humans ran deep. They had centuries of fear built into their culture, fear that humans could not understand, fear that humans could survive what no other species could. Evan was already at his desk when she arrived. His hair was tousled and his sleeves were rolled up as he scrolled through another batch of communication logs. He glanced up, saw her, and smiled faintly. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied. The word felt strange on her tongue, almost casual. He gestured toward a chair and she sat. She never needed the chair, but she liked the way it allowed her to observe without seeming imposing. Evan returned to his work, but she ignored the data pads and screens for a moment. She studied him, not his face exactly, but the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he reacted to stress. "You handle pressure differently from others," she said. Evan paused. "I guess I just don't panic," he said. "Doesn't mean I'm not scared, I just keep moving anyway." Saris tilted her head slightly. "You accept risk that others avoid. That's life," he replied. "Either you move forward or you get left behind." There was a simplicity in his words that unsettled her. Her people hid behind rules and masks. The galaxy survived, or thought it survived, because of their control and restraint. Humans survived because they embraced life fully with all its mess, all its mistakes. She had never understood it until now. Later that day, the station received a transmission from a distant sector. The message was urgent. A small human-led research outpost had lost communication. The alien species that shared the region had immediately called for a coalition response, assuming the humans were incapable of defending themselves. Evan was summoned to analyze the situation. He found himself walking alongside Saris in the command corridor. She did not speak much, but her presence was heavier than usual, filled with silent calculation. Evan tried to focus on the data, but he felt her gaze occasionally shift toward him. "Why do you trust humans so easily?" she asked suddenly. Evan looked up. "Trust isn't just about certainty, it's about understanding limits. Humans, we survive because we find ways around our limits." She considered this. Humans were strange creatures. They felt fear, pain, and doubt more than most species, yet they never allowed those feelings to decide their actions. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and resilient in ways her species rarely allowed themselves to be. The communication logs showed the outpost was under pressure, but not yet defeated. The crew had barricaded themselves inside and sent automated distress signals. The aliens nearby had begun to panic, sending exaggerated reports about the danger. "Most species would have already surrendered or called for evacuation," Saris said. Evan nodded. "Yeah, that's usually the point where humans start improvising." Her gaze sharpened. "Improvising is dangerous." "Depends on what you're improvising," he replied. "Sometimes it's the only way to survive." They arrived at the outpost sector a few hours later. From a distance, the station could see the alien fleets forming a blockade. Their ships were precise, disciplined, almost perfect in formation. But something felt off, too rigid, too certain of the humans' failure. Evan studied the data. "They think humans can't handle this," he said. "They're wrong." Saris tilted her head. "You are confident." "Not confident," he said. "Aware." The humans inside the outpost were improvising as expected. Makeshift shields, redirected power to defensive systems, and carefully calculated countermeasures. Each action carried risk, yet each was deliberate. The aliens, meanwhile, expected chaos. They expected fear. Evan and Saris watched the battle unfold from the observation deck. The humans moved in ways no alien fleet had predicted. They exploited minor flaws in the blockade, diverted attention, and gradually began to regain control. "Why are they so efficient?" Saris asked. Evan smiled faintly. "Because they survive by thinking, by feeling, by refusing to accept fear as final." Hours later, the blockade began to falter. The aliens' formations broke, and they retreated to regroup. The outpost was safe, and the human crew cheered. Saris felt something unfamiliar. Pride, not her own, not personal, but a shared human pride. She realized she had never seen her people survive with this kind of raw, uncontrolled determination. Humans did not hide, they did not fear exposure, and yet they endured. When the battle ended, she turned to Evan. "You understand them," she said softly. "I try," he replied. "Humans are messy, but they get results." She studied him for a long moment. "You do not see them as fragile." "Why would I?" he asked. "They've survived everything the galaxy thought would destroy them." For the first time, Saris allowed herself to wonder what it would mean to show her own face. Not in front of a summit, not in front of observers, but in front of someone who understood strength in a different way. Someone who could see beyond the mask and not recoil. That evening, the station was quiet. Evan returned to his desk, tired but alert. Saris lingered outside the operations room, unsure whether to enter. Then she stepped in. "You remained calm today," she said. Evan shrugged. "Someone had to?" "You accept uncertainty," she said. "It's unavoidable," he replied. "Better to face it than hide from it." Saris considered the room. No cameras, no observers, no expectation of protocol. She could remove the mask. She could reveal herself completely. And yet, she hesitated. The galaxy had long believed such an act would be catastrophic. But Evan looked at her unafraid, unflinching, and she felt the weight of centuries begin to lift. "You are different," she said quietly. "Different how?" he asked. "You do not fear me," she said. Evan smiled faintly. "I see a person, that's enough." Her hand hovered near the mask, not touching it yet. The room felt still. Even the station lights seemed to dim slightly, as if waiting. She realized something vital. Humans survived not because they avoided fear, but because they faced it directly with clarity and resolve. She had never faced anyone like that before. Not a diplomat, not a soldier, not a scientist. But Evan Cole, ordinary, unassuming, human, faced the world without hiding, without bowing, without fear. And in that moment she understood. The galaxy feared humans not because they were dangerous in the way her species was, but because they could endure. They could adapt. They could thrive where others would fail. She did not speak for a long moment. The silence was not awkward. It was alive. "You survived the summit," she said finally. Evan leaned back in his chair. "And humans always survive, that's kind of the point." Saris considered the truth in his words. She understood something profound. Strength did not always lie in hiding, in controlling and isolating oneself from the world. Sometimes it lay in exposure, in risk, in embracing the chaos of life and choosing to act anyway. "You have taught me much," she said quietly. "No," Evan replied. "You just needed to notice." For the first time, she felt a connection that required no mask, no words, no protocol. A connection that simply existed, and she knew deep inside that the next step would be the hardest. Not surviving a battle, not navigating a summit, but revealing herself fully to someone who had already seen more than anyone else had. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries. Their strength was raw, unpredictable, and terrifying to those who could not understand it. And now, Saris realized, she was beginning to see it for herself, not as an observer, but as someone who could finally participate in that strength. The mask had kept her safe for centuries. But perhaps it was time to test whether she could survive without it, too. The station was quieter than usual that evening. Even the hum of the life support system seemed softer, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Envoy Saris moved through the corridors with her usual precision, but tonight her steps were measured differently. There was a weight to her movements, a tension that had nothing to do with protocol or duty. She had made the decision, not lightly, not carelessly. But after observing humans, after watching their resilience, their courage, their quiet strength, she realized she had underestimated something essential. She stopped outside the operations room, the place where she had first truly noticed Evan Cole. The door was closed, the lights inside casting a soft glow beneath the frame. She hesitated only for a moment and then entered. Evan looked up from his desk, surprised but not alarmed. "You're back," he said. His voice was calm, easy, yet somehow aware that this was not just another visit. "Yes," she said softly, "I am back." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit if you want." She did. The motion was almost ritualistic, but tonight it carried a different weight. She did not hide behind her mask as a symbol of authority or fear. It was still there, but she felt its presence differently, like a barrier she no longer needed to trust. "You asked me why humans survive," she said quietly. Evan leaned back in his chair. "I think you already know the answer," he replied. She looked down at her hands. For centuries, she had hidden her face, believing it to be dangerous to reveal her true self. Her species had taught her that expression was power, that emotions could dominate, corrupt, or destroy. And yet humans lived openly, fearfully, messily, and survived. She met his eyes even though his expression was simple and unassuming. "I want to understand fully," she said, "not as an observer but as someone who wishes to experience it." Evan's eyes widened slightly. "You mean you want to remove it?" "Yes," she said. "Here, now." The room was silent, not uncomfortable, not tense, just still. Even the lights seemed to wait for what would come next. She reached up slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the mask. It was cool to the touch, smooth and unyielding. She felt the years of caution, the centuries of habit, the careful rules of her people pressing against her. And then she let go. With a single motion, she lifted the mask away from her face. The room felt different immediately. The light reflected off her features, delicate and strong at the same time. Her eyes were clear, calm, and unafraid. The structure of her face was unfamiliar to most species, but to Evan it was human enough to feel familiar, real, and present. He did not recoil. He did not hesitate, he did not falter. "You see me," she said quietly, almost in awe of her own words. "I do," Evan replied, "and I don't think less of you, I think maybe I understand a little more." There was no panic, no recoil, no fear, just acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement carried a weight that was heavier than any battle she had ever faced. "You have faced more than most realize," Evan said. "But humans survive because we choose to, because we feel it all and keep going anyway." Her eyes studied him. Not just his words, but the way he carried himself, the quiet determination that did not need ceremony, the strength in simplicity. She realized then that he was more than a systems analyst, more than a human who had tolerated her presence without fear. He was the embodiment of what she had learned about humanity: resilience, courage, and unwavering adaptability. "I see it now," she said softly. "The galaxy has feared humans not because they are reckless, but because they endure where others fail. They act when others hesitate, and they survive where others would crumble." Evan smiled faintly. "Exactly, that's all it is, simple, messy, and powerful." Her shoulders relaxed for the first time in centuries. The mask, once a necessity, now felt like a relic. A barrier that had protected her but also isolated her. She had survived behind it, but she had never truly lived, not until now. "Do you know why I hid for so long?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. "Because the galaxy demanded it," Evan offered. "Partly," she said. "But mostly because I did not trust that anyone could face me without fear. I did not trust that anyone could see the truth of my expression and survive." "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "I know that some can, that some will not turn away. That some can see strength and not panic, and I see it in you." Evan shrugged, almost self-consciously. "I didn't do anything special, I just looked." "You looked and you did not flinch," she said. "That is more than many could manage, that is strength." The room seemed warmer now, the lights brighter, yet softer. Saras felt a weight lift, one that she had carried for centuries. She had hidden her face to protect others. And yet, in doing so, she had denied herself a connection that humans took for granted every day: acceptance, understanding, and the quiet courage of recognition. "You understand us now," Evan said, leaning back. "Not fully, maybe, but you understand the core of it. Humans survive by feeling everything and acting anyway. That is the truth." Saras nodded. For the first time, she felt free, not from duty, not from responsibility, but free to exist without the shield she had carried for so long. She realized that human strength was not in armor or secrecy, but in transparency, in courage, in the ability to face fear without letting it dictate action. She looked at Evan again. "You have changed my understanding of strength. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are, because you are human." Evan smiled faintly. "We're messy, yeah, but we survive, that's the point." Her eyes softened. She could have left the mask on and walked away, keeping the tradition and safety of her species intact. But that was not survival, that was hiding. And she had learned something far more important: that survival alone was not enough. True strength required trust, connection, and the courage to be seen. The galaxy outside might still fear humans. It might still doubt them, underestimate them, and challenge them at every turn. But she knew the truth now: humans could endure anything. They could adapt, overcome, and even inspire those who had hidden behind masks for centuries. For the first time in centuries, Saras did not feel the need to hide. Not from protocol, not from duty, not from fear. She could face the galaxy, face challenges, and face herself. And she could do it without the mask that had defined her for so long. "You are different from anyone I have met," she said quietly, almost to herself. "And I am glad." Evan looked at her, unafraid, understanding without words. "You're welcome." The moment stretched, simple and profound. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise. It was recognition. Two beings, human and otherwise, acknowledging strength, courage, and the quiet beauty of survival. Saras realized then that the galaxy might still underestimate humanity. It might still fear the unpredictable, the emotional, the uncontrolled. But humans had something no one else had mastered: the ability to endure, adapt, and act. And that ability was contagious. She knew she had learned something that the galaxy had not yet recognized. She had learned that strength was not in the mask, the barrier, or the armor. Strength was in connection, in trust, in courage, in living fully without fear dictating every move. And in Evan Cole she had found a reflection of that truth. For the first time she smiled. Not behind a mask, not in secret, fully, clearly, unafraid. And the galaxy unknowingly was about to see a new side of humans, a side that endured, that acted, that thrived, and that inspired even those who had hidden from the world for centuries. The mask was gone. The fear was gone. And humanity, through the eyes of one quiet, observant analyst, had won again.